The economy is Babylon. So you have giants living in your neighborhood and on the beach. Giants. You can watch them walk around. They look like basketball players. White, black, giants. It's kind of like the Princess Bride. So you have to know that those giants are on their side, worshiping God 100% of the time. And you have to know that Brittany's worshiping God with everything she thinks, says, and does in order to stay alive. But she would die otherwise. God is more powerful than Satan. So the Babylonians can't rape a Christian, a true Christian like Brittany, who's never had an image before God. The reason why Brittany's telling the church and the authority is because their checks have been stolen for 20 years. And she affects the celebrities, the reality stars from her town. Because the real supermodels since the year 2000, who are not slave trade brands since the year 2000 at the high school, are owed the money. So it's through Brittany to pay the Ford models and to pay the ones she worked with who are not slave trade brands since the year 2000. But all their checks were stolen for 20 years. All. And no family paid them in relation to them having it stolen. And so they had to have the 100,000 to live, but even the 550 to live out. And it's like that their whole life, 5 times more than anyone's kid who would get the 10, who would not party, who wouldn't party with the investors, and who would get the charities raised, 2 for 10 so that they would have more. But people would know to pay that without them asking. And it's different for everyone, and some people aren't meant to ask, but they would know how to be a Christian. So it's this low-end sales for low rent that the top percentage didn't have. And so it's not available for anybody else because they're 20-year slaves. And so they would have been paid charities out of Compton when they're the top percentage supermodels, talent, and producers out of Compton for a 5-7 year period. And when all their checks are stolen, people are raped homeless. So they would have to have money in a bank account with money saved in order to have a place, and a place inland with all their papers without even having to deal with any last minute anything, because they're exploited by their network being cut off completely by Jewish families, Christian families, Mormon, every religion, not believing in the New Testament for their life and not believing that they're the top percentage when they're the only top percentage that exists that first 7 years, the first 5 years. And they had to have the money in order to not be heckled by the slave trade, who were paid off by a bribe since the year 2000. So it's an occult to not pay them and to not speak on their behalf and defend them. So the problem is a direct deposit without expecting any of their time or expecting for them to check in, because they don't with anyone, because you don't protect anyone. God does. And so they could live on their own without talking to anyone for 20 years until they have kids, and it could be 20-year models who are 40 now, and they've just been busy because it makes it so they're bedridden 10 years into working. So it's whatever they did for the first 8 years, and they'd have sales. And they'd have the low-end sales in the $400,000 to have small 2-bedroom apartments for $400 per month rent. But they weren't given that as the top percentage. And so it's an issue with them suddenly not having money and not having any ability to defend themselves, because people go to jail without having car insurance or without having the title to their car. So right now, these top percentage anti-slave trade supermodels, talent producers, and full-time artist teams and their celebrity sales managers are exploited by the slave trade, Victoria's Secret models, and their slave trade managers and their employees and their healthcare paid off as a product of retail since the year 2000 out of every city in suburbia, but all out of Orange County through their local church, who hosted LGBT rights for minimum wage parties where they found a problem because their families offered them up for sale. Britney's aren't, but they have to be paid the direct deposit. And so the biggest problem is having money. And they don't, in front of everyone. They're not blamed for any exploitation because it's demonic, like not having an editor or being bullied when they can control the media because they're not raped and they're not sold to the mental asylum for the healthcare as a product of retail. But that's the entire industry, and you would have to pay this separate economy in order. Britney as a referral for the ones she worked with, Ford and all agencies she's been signed with, and the ones she worked with because it's bicoastal international. And so it's the first 10 as the last 10. It's the first 10 as a referral for the last 10 who are not slave trade brands, as a referral for their sales network who need to be rescued. So people are homeless human trafficking victims as their sales network. And they're also porn stars on heroin. And so they need to be rescued if they didn't drug, rape, kidnap, lock up the innocent. But Britney's agency is a separate economy no one paid. And they have to be paid now. Direct deposits. Without expecting their time, without criticizing why she's alive. You worship God or Satan. It's this basic small office with all her pictures saved to a USB. This is a Playboy brothel voiceover, and it's your government.